This was the scene in Kenosha just 1 week ago. Protesters clashed with police and set fire to cars and buildings as anger boiled over following the police shooting of Jacob Blake on August 23rd. The 29-year-old African-American was shot in the back 7 times at close range, while his children looked on. Blake is said to be paralyzed from the waist down. An investigation into the incident is ongoing. The shooting triggered 3 nights of violent clashes in Kenosha and nationwide protests. Video also emerged showing armed vigilante groups in the city, with police appearing to support them. Last Tuesday, 2 of the protesters were shot dead and a 3rd one wounded, the suspect a white vigilante. The 17-year-old was caught on DW camera shortly before the attack. Armed with a semi-automatic rifle, he tries to approach the police, who merely tell him to leave. He's now been charged with homicide. Local authorities called in the National Guard and imposed a nighttime curfew to regain control. The unrest surrounding anti-racism protests has taken centre stage in the campaign for November's presidential election, with Donald Trump promising to restore law and order. Given the tensions, some community leaders have asked the president not to visit.
This community is trying to heal. We're trying to pull together, and I think that at this point in time, it's not the best idea.
Peaceful protests are still continuing every day in Kenosha, with some protesters leaving no doubt about their thoughts on the presidential visit.
And President Trump says he is the best candidate capable of keeping Americans safe, but Democrats disagree and criticize his repeated use of aggressive language. He was tackled on that issue in an interview on Fox News.
I have to be aggressive because I'm like standing here in a sea of incompetent people, stupid people, and violent people, very violent.
But that's the kind of language, stupid
that's
people.
Okay.
That's a lot of women don't like
it's also
that.
Well, where are we? Oh, we're in the White House, I see. Okay? So I'm standing here in a sea of people, and we need law and order in this country, and women see that with me. You're never going to have law and order with Biden.
DW's Peter Dahl has been looking into this. Good morning to you, Peter. Nice to see you again. President Trump has been framing Joe Biden as the candidate of chaos and violence. Could this be a strategy that will see him pull ahead in the polls and eventually win?
Well, I think it's frankly his best shot at, coming back and maybe win re-election. The reality is that Trump's approval ratings are very low. They've been throughout his presidency, but have dipped even further, especially considering his handling of the corona crisis, which has been widely panned. Also, his handling of the economy is being met with increasing criticism. So Trump really needs to change the narrative. And it looks like what he's doing, he's trying to take a page out of the, Nixon 68 campaign book, where Richard Nixon was stoking fear amid, a period of great civil unrest, the student protests, civil rights movement, a lot of violent clashes.
That was a successful strategy.
And that was a very successful strategy, exactly. Trump really needs to win back the suburbs, right? These were, especially in places like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, that helped him put him over the top and put him in the White House. That in 2018 and 2020, we've seen the suburbs tilting increasingly towards the Democrats. A lot of, especially women voters, have been very turned off by Trump's inflammatory rhetoric. And so Trump needs to stick to that strategy, essentially, to have any hopes of winning back the suburbs. And it appears to be working somewhat. Support for Black Lives Matter protests are dropping. More than a 20-point drop, not just among Republicans, but also among white suburban voters. So it does appear to be working.
Okay, and those are big supporters of BLM, the white suburban voters. Let's take a look now and listen to what Joe Biden has been saying about Trump.
This president long ago forfeited any moral leadership in this country. He can't stop the violence because for years he's fomented it. He may believe mouthing the words law and order makes him strong, but his failure to call on his own supporters to stop acting as an armed militia in this country shows how weak he is.
So what do you think, Peter? Is Joe Biden effectively saying here that President Trump is in control of the counter-protesters, a good number of whom are, of course, armed and support him.
Yeah. Biden essentially also in that speech, I think, said President Trump has made America a more dangerous place. You know, Biden is trying to essentially also say, you know, all of this is happening on Trump's watch, not just the pandemic, but also the racial unrest that we're witnessing right now. And so he asked also at that protest or that rally, do you really feel safer under Donald Trump? We know that a lot of these right-wing counter-protests, a lot of them have more nationalist right-wing leanings, that they are ardent Trump supporters. Trump has not been particularly good, if at all, you know, at condemning these groups. We saw that not just in Kenosha, not just in Portland, but also 2017 in Charlottesville with the big right-wing rally that led to the death of a counter-protester, where Trump ultimately said, you know, there were very fine people on both sides. That's a response that he's been, you know, very much criticized for, that Biden said effectively was his reason to get into the campaign in the first place. And Biden instead is running on the strategy of, you know, he wants to unite the country. He wants to heal the wounds that have grown deeper over the past 4 years. That was also very much the message of the Democratic Convention.
And President Trump has stayed out of everything up until now. This is his position. As the cities burned, he was criticized for letting them burn.
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, and also because a lot of these cities are run by Democrats. And so Trump's view is that this helps him, right? If this is happening on Democrats' watch, obviously that proves his point. The problem is, you know, a majority of Americans approve of Biden's message. We saw that in polling coming out of the convention. They disapprove of the Republican message. At the end of the day, though, ultimately, that's not what's going to decide the election, most likely. It is what is happening in the suburbs. If this message of stoking fears in the suburbs will help, you know, Trump regain those voters, that means that Biden is looking at a very uphill battle going ahead.
Peter, good to see you. Thanks so much for that.
Thank you.